The only way man can continue to prosper is to continue to be curious. And we have plenty of curiosity. This is the Be a Great Thinker podcast, examining the world and cutting through the BS, breaking down issues, looking at them through philosophical and intellectual eyes. And now your host, author of the book with the same title, the Be a Great Thinker podcast. This is Adrian Roth.
Hello, my wonderful listeners. Thank you for tuning into the Be a Great Thinker podcast. I am your host, Adrian Roth. Today's episode is our Election Day episode. Here is my question for you. Have you voted yet? If not, then, are you planning to vote? Over the last few elections, we consistently hear the statement that that particular election is the most critical election. And yes, they all have been to some degree. That sentiment is even more relevant to this election. Without question, it appears that everything is at stake in this election, probably more than in any other election in our country's history. The people we elect will determine the fate of our democracy, whether we sustain it or lose it. You, as a voter, have the power to influence that fate with your vote. If you have been watching the news or listening to pundits, you might have a mixed view of the crucial issues we face. It's a mixed bag, depending on who has your ear. Let me see if I can break it down a little for you. According to a Rasmussen poll recorded on October 20th, the top issue on everyone's minds is the economy, the second is violent crime. Down the line comes abortion, immigration, gun violence, education, foreign policy, the Supreme Court, climate change, healthcare, and the future of our democracy. If we examine each issue, we can gauge how they impact our lives, and why they should or should not matter, as to whom you will help determine should lead this country. Let us start with the economy. This is the biggest issue for all voters, whether Democrat, Republican, Independent, or other. The economy is a kitchen table issue. The growing cost of just about everything is foremost on people's minds. You try to maintain a budget, expecting your money to last, but when you go to the store, you fill up your shopping cart and hold your breath, hoping you have enough money to cover the expense. Have you put something back just because that one item caused your budget to tip over? I know that I certainly have. And thankfully, I don't drive as much as I used to, so I don't feel the sting of rising gas prices like some people do. I also have a car with pretty good gas mileage, so thankfully, I only need to fill up my tank every 4 to 6 weeks. I am lucky in that sense. The truth is that the economy is not on a downfall. The job market is the best it has been in decades. More people are employed now than have been for many years. Wages have also increased, but with the soaring prices of all consumer goods, and with rising housing costs, the higher salaries just are not cutting it. People still have to pinch pennies to make ends meet. The inflation we are enduring comes from COVID, and also the continuing supply chain issues that still have yet to be resolved entirely. It was also due to low interest rates that made the housing market bubble rise to a crazy level until the Fed finally started to raise interest rates. But this only made the situation unbearable because this increased mortgage rates, and subsequently, rental rates also increased. Because of the rising mortgage rates, people decided that they could not afford to buy a new home, and then had to go back to renting. Cities that were always a little too expensive, with consistently high rental costs, have now made it almost impossible for most people that live in those cities to find reasonably priced housing. Here is the thing, there is no reason for the prices to be so high. The only reason is pure greed. It is not Biden's or the Democrats' fault that the cost of everything is outrageous. Nope, you can blame manufacturers, retailers, oil companies, landlords, and billionaires who love making money and could care less that people are suffering. They have the power to control prices, but they don't want to. They know we all need to eat, wear clothes, pay our utility bills, put gas in our cars, educate our kids, and have a roof over our heads. If they raise prices, and we are all still willing to pay those rates, why do they need to lower the cost of anything? You're paying it, so they are happy and keep getting wealthier and wealthier, while people in the middle and working classes are taking the brunt of the economic suffering. If you want to put the blame on anyone, then blame them, as well as right-wing blowhards and corporate Democrats who only want to help the wealthy maintain their status in our society while the rest of us struggle. They get a nice payout from corporations and billionaires, so they feel no need to make laws that will protect consumers. The politicians who block laws that help the average consumer were initially sent to Congress to work on behalf of their constituents, but when they tasted the sweetness of these corporate and lobbyist payouts, they changed their view of how business was done, and all of their good intentions went out the window. They were hooked on the power and the lovely perks that came with it. All others who needed their help and their influence, be damned. The second biggest issue for all people is crime. Depending on whom you talk to, this particular issue has an ingrained racial element. White voters will see crime as mainly something done by black people against white or other black citizens. Black people see it without race, but as an inherent problem that the black community has to face, especially if they live in a neighborhood that does not benefit from fair policing. Yes, crime is an issue. If the economy is terrible, people will lash out, and this can create a crime wave. It isn't just businesses getting robbed or people being assaulted. There is also easy access to guns, drug culture, racism, misogyny, and the deepening divide in cultural ideologies and economic status that help proliferate that crime wave. Depending on whom you ask, the increase in crime has different implications. To some, the rise in crime might indicate the breakdown of society. You might see a type of crime in your mind that would confirm this idea in your head. Maybe you see a masked, armed man robbing a convenience store, or a mob of people protesting and causing havoc in some city as they also loot and vandalize property. Or a woman being raped by a stranger, or a child being abducted and molested by a creep in a van. Or a deranged gunman using an AR-15 at a school or a store, or gunning down a dozen unsuspecting individuals who are just going about their business, trying to live their lives. They are all part of the problem, but they aren't the only types of crimes proliferating our society. What about hackers interrupting businesses or individuals with their nefarious cyber crimes? These hackers aren't only from the United States, most come from other countries like Nigeria, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. These countries doing the hacking have also found ways to infiltrate our discourse through social media and have, in turn, helped change how we have viewed and then elected our politicians. Though some of these hackers were caught, most still are able to continue their crimes because the ones in charge of these social media platforms can't or won't stop them. Or what about citizens who racially profile people of color, get in their faces, and accuse them of doing some ridiculous crime? Then these instigators call the police, thinking that they will have the police on their side. We have given them the moniker of Karen and consider them nothing but a nuisance. Actually, they are perpetrators of a kind of criminal behavior that is a reflection of their sense of privilege and an overabundance of self-centeredness. These Karens consider their needs more important than anyone else's, and they will do what they must to get their way, even if they have to file a false accusation against someone to get their point across. What they are doing is absolutely criminal, but we don't seem to count those crimes in the crime statistics. How about the police? I am not necessarily one of the people calling to defund the police. I don't think that makes sense, but I think too many police are caught up in a toxic culture, and far too many of them are poorly trained. In contrast, I feel that many police officers shouldn't carry a badge. There are too many white supremacist cops who think they have the right to do as they wish, to whomever they see fit to do it to, as they feel they have the power of the badge, and they carry a gun, and they have the protection of the law that often supports their bad, and even deadly behavior. But how many police have murdered innocent individuals for no reason other than they were trigger-happy and not because their lives were being threatened? We don't seem to count the many times these rogue police officers have injured or murdered someone in our crime statistics. Those particular crimes don't seem to matter. Or how about when a politician, political leader, pundit, or sometimes even a celebrity is discovered to have done something that was at its core a treasonous, dangerous, or criminal act, but because of who they are given a pass and not treated the same as the small-time criminal who will always be given a much worse punishment for much less of a crime? Do we count the crimes that these blue-collar, upper-class, and powerful people commit in our crime statistics? It often appears that we don't, because truthfully, the powerful rarely get indicted, much less go to prison, for their crimes. Crime in this country is a complex issue. There are many layers to it. Crime also touches on other problems that were high on the Rasmussen poll, such as immigration. For many, immigration is a huge issue. It seems to be on the top of the list of what Republicans find most concerning. But, let's face it, immigration really doesn't impact most of our lives. The majority of us wouldn't even think about immigrants if it weren't for the right-wing media, which persists in bringing up the issue of immigration at every opportunity that they can. The right wing needs a boogeyman, and immigrants are ripe for this status. No doubt, there is a real problem at the southern border. The reason for the influx of immigrants seeking asylum from South America is mainly because they have political turmoil in their home countries. Honestly, the United States has partially contributed to that turmoil. And, in turn, have not helped those countries combat or improve their turmoil. These immigrants are people who have found themselves in the middle of an awful government that want to destroy the lives of its citizens with its authoritarian rule. They are fleeing perilous situations, hoping for a better life in the United States, which they heard was a place of salvation. In seeking this new life, many go on dangerous journeys to our southern border. They bring themselves and their families, hoping they will find a safer and more welcoming situation. They attempt this journey even though the welcome mat from the United States has been summarily tossed aside. But they continue to take this risk, because what awaits them if they were forced to return to their country is infinitely worse than what they will have to endure when arriving at the southern border of the United States. When these already suffering migrants get here, they are immediately subjected to repressive conditions. The Trump administration took great pleasure in causing as much pain to these immigrants as they could. They threw them into concentration camps, separated children from their parents, sometimes even losing these kids in the process. The Biden administration has only eased up a little on this treatment. Now, right-wing politicians use these immigrants as pawns, playing twisted political games. They think they are doing something spectacular with their political stunts, but all it shows is their abject cruelty and lack of humanity toward people who need compassion. Unfortunately, the immigration problem is so big that the Biden administration has really not improved it. They have tried, at least, to do something positive for the dreamers. This is in contrast to the last administration, which pledged to throw all dreamers out of the country. The dreamers have been a more positive force for this country, as opposed to most of their Republican right-wing opponents. They have added to the welfare of this country, while the right-wingers, who despise their existence, have done little more than cause harm to the country overall. All of us, except for Native Americans, were immigrants, or children, or grandchildren of immigrants. We should all remember this, and have mercy and empathy for those who need our help. But Republicans, who once used to have compassion for immigrants, now only want to give these marginalized souls a hard time. They want to shut the door on them, and they insist on blaming immigrants for all the bad things happening in the country, instead of looking in the mirror at who really is the cause of this country's issues. There is obviously no reason to blame immigrants. They don't steal away the country's resources, they actually add to them. Immigration should not be such a big issue or such a major problem for the country. It really does not need to be on the top of the list of what ails this country. We do need to make becoming a citizen of this country a smoother transition. We need to open up our borders to more people, and not just people with pale skin from European nations. We need to help those countries that are having issues and are the cause of the influx of immigrants. These are all very important in fixing the issues of immigration, but one that both parties, but most especially the Republicans, loathe doing. And later in this episode, we will explain how the immigration problem could actually get worse. We do need to confront those issues head-on, fix them, and learn to be more empathetic. That is really what many of us lack, especially those on the right wing. We will take a short break. When we return, we will discuss a few more complex issues ailing this country. And some of these issues may be the hardest to tackle.
Critical thinking. What does it actually mean? It means questioning everything. But it also means questioning the questions. Critical thinking is essential for cutting through the junk you are exposed to on social media and everywhere else. It's for challenging conspiracy theories. It's for finding the truth in a sea of lies and misconceptions. Want to know how you can learn critical thinking? We'll show you how, in our book series, Be a Great Thinker. Be a Great Thinker is a series for people as young as 10 years old to as old as 90. The series introduces you to philosophy, philosophers, and the art of critical thinking. The book series will help you use your brain to be a great thinker. Book 1 is the introduction to critical thinking. And each book that follows introduces you to a different philosopher, like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and more, revealing their concepts and ideas in an easy and down-to-earth way. Find the series online at your favorite bookstore, or visit our website at beagreatthinker.com. So, be a great thinker and be part of the critical thinking revolution.
You're listening to the Be a Great Thinker podcast. We're bringing back the art of critical thinking.
Welcome back to our Election Day episode of the Be a Great Thinker podcast. Now, one of the most challenging and divisive issues in this country is the issue of guns. Undoubtedly, guns are a problem that should have more dominance on the scale of what is a crucial issue in this country. But the gun issue is also very subjective. Again, depending on whom you speak with, there either needs to be more guns, or we have far too many guns. I am clearly on the side that says that we have way too many guns in this country. It isn't just that we have too many guns, but also that getting a gun is just too easy. How is it harder to get a license to sell insurance or drive a car than it is to obtain a firearm permit? How does this make sense? And the issue of crime ties right into the issue of guns. Too many guns, too much crime. It goes hand in hand. Personally, I would love to see all guns disappear, but I know that in this country, that is nothing but a fantasy. We have crossed a threshold of gun ownership that we can never cross back. People love their guns. They do not want to have their right to own a weapon taken away. For many, they feel it is their God-given right to own that gun, and they will fight to keep that right, no matter what that fight entails. It no longer makes news when someone brings a gun to a school, a place of worship, a mall, a restaurant, a movie theater, a concert, or a parade, and then shoots people down in cold blood just because they have a grudge or simply for the hell of it. Where we used to feel outraged by these mass shootings, we barely blink an eye. Our outrage means nothing. Politicians, and this is both Republican and Democrat, are not inclined to change our current gun problem, except, ironically, to make it easier to access and use guns. When they make stupid rules that give easier access to guns, then guess what? Crime goes up. Isn't it weird how more guns equal more crime? Lately, the issue of guns has been tied to education. This is mainly because of all the school shootings. Although, we will never resolve this problem, as most politicians don't have the guts or the stomach to fix this. Most kids are scared to go to school. They don't want to be killed by a crazed gunman, but how do you tell a child to not fear this situation when it can happen anywhere, at any school, and those in leadership refuse to do what they must to stop this insanity? But gun violence is not the only issue that is plaguing our education system. There are also too many restrictions on schools and too little funding. When COVID hit and schools were forced to close, it caused a tremendous ripple in our society. Being forced to learn at home had disadvantaged many kids and many schools. Children, who were already somewhat isolated with the influx of social media, were now even more isolated by the virus and its effects. COVID helped to impair many kids' social skills. Now, it appears that a whole generation of children may be left in the dust. Then when the schools reopened, the need to wear masks in order to protect vulnerable children from this terrible virus started a hideous trend in our society, with ridiculous, uninformed, and obnoxiously loud parents interrupting school meetings to spew their conspiracy theories against schools following protocols and guidelines that was put there to protect the kids of these stupid, complaining parents. It only put schools that were already on the brink at an even worse place. School boards had to contend with idiotic adults who shouted their stupid conspiracy theories and outrageously misinformed ideologies that harassed teachers and school board members. The schools were threatened with lawsuits and violence. It gave right-wingers the opportunity to spew more of their crap, which made what was already a bad situation worse. To add to this constant chaos, there were awful politicians like Greg Abbott in Texas or Ron DeSantis from Florida, threatening schools with losing funding if they chose the students' well-being and lives, protecting them from the COVID virus over bowing down and following misguided rules and laws that these blowhard politicians put into place that only suffice to advance their ridiculous political whims. They had a flurry of supporters that now had long lists of books they insisted must be banned, and then accused teachers of giving kitty litter to kids who aspired to being furry creatures, or being upset at teaching actual history like slavery or the Holocaust. They were doing what they could to tie the hands of educators. Then some of the worst offenders, like the a-hole DeSantis and other blowhards and bigoted politicians, purposely made the lives of transgender kids a living hell by doing everything they could to make these already marginalized kids have an even harder time trying to make it through their daily lives. They did this by putting out restrictive measures like forcing them to use the bathrooms of their particular born gender, or not allowing them to play sports, or subjecting them to physical examinations, all to make them feel even worse about themselves. Basically, these vile politicians decided that transgender kids were the next boogeyman, much like immigrants. To top all of that, we have a crisis of teachers leaving the profession in droves. Teaching is already one of the most poorly paid professions, with almost no incentive for growth. And with all of the new scrutiny on the education system, there is very little incentive for teachers to stay. Our education system is on code red, and no one in power seems to care. This, ultimately, will lead to generations of less educated people and will put this country at a greater disadvantage against other nations. As it is, we already need to catch up. But education is not top of mind regarding what is important to politicians. It isn't a sexy issue, and neither is climate change. Yet if we do not start addressing either of these issues, we will crumble as a society. Climate change affects all of us. It affects everything we do, and it is becoming a more dominant issue with each passing year. Many still deny it, and many of those climate change deniers are right-wing politicians. For the majority, we really only get a good taste of climate change when we see how it affects our weather. Our summers are getting hotter, our winters are getting colder, and the fire and hurricane seasons are getting progressively worse each year. Climate change means drought, and with drought comes the inability to grow crops. The inability to grow crops eventually brings a shortage of food. Climate change will make icebergs melt, and with that, the oceans will rise. When the oceans rise, land will disappear, and our landscape will change inextricably. The warming of the oceans will cause sea life to go extinct. This will cause a ripple effect throughout the planet. The more we are affected by the crisis, the worse it will be for the world. Everyone who lives on the planet will have to contend with the issues brought on by climate change. If it seems like a doomsday scenario, it kind of is. but it will likely be our reality in about 50 years, if not sooner. It may not kill us, but it will change the quality of our lives, in that our lives will have much less quality. You can take that to the bank. The climate change crisis also leads us to another political concern that was brought up as a primary issue in the Rasmussen poll, and that is the issue of foreign relations. A lot of us are tired of the endless wars. The Iraq and Afghanistan wars wore us down, and it doesn't matter what side we were on when those two wars started. Watching other countries and their conflicts, like the endless wars in Syria, the Middle East and Africa, the war in Ukraine, and the possible conflict between Taiwan and China, makes many of us want to shut our eyes to the world. We don't want to be part of those conflicts. They don't concern us. But they actually do. Our relationship with the world is vital to our existence. Without being supportive of our allies, we cannot expect them to support us in a crisis. Plus, we must keep fascism and other far-right or far-left ideologies from taking hold of any country. We have to support our allies and keep the world safe. Part of that means joining together to fix climate change. If we don't, we will have a larger problem, in that those nations that do not have a handle on climate change and the destruction it causes will no longer be able to sustain their populations. The people from those countries will need to seek refuge elsewhere. As I stated earlier, if you believe that we have an immigration problem now, wait until things get rougher in those countries that will start suffering due to the ravages of climate change. If you think our immigration issue is intolerable today, just wait, it will get worse. Everything ties together. We need to understand that we are not just citizens of the United States, but that we are citizens of the world. Politicians with any sense of what is beyond the end of their noses will realize this. And those that do understand this should be chosen to lead. Those that do not should not be allowed to govern, as they will only continue denying the obvious. And, in turn, they will only make life difficult for the rest of us. Healthcare is another kitchen table issue. It affects everyone. I am of the ilk that Obamacare was not enough for our healthcare. Not even Medicare for all is enough. We need single-payer healthcare. Single-payer healthcare is what is found in other countries like Sweden, France, and England, where your healthcare is covered with one fee, without extra costs and less restrictions. Simply put, our healthcare system sucks. There are no two ways around it. Just like the gun issue, politicians don't have the stomach to do what is necessary to make our lives better regarding healthcare. This is because healthcare and pharmaceutical companies are paying them off. So, they don't want to mess with that great payout. Part of it is a very complex issue, and few politicians want to tackle it. But Republican right-wing nuts are telling you exactly what they intend to do if you vote them back into power. They have no intention of giving us a good, decent healthcare option. Instead, they talk about privatizing healthcare, which it already is for the most part, and to a terrible degree. They are promising to eliminate Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. This is not the first time they tried to destroy these important programs. They didn't have much success in killing it in the past. But, if given a new opportunity, they will attempt to try to kill it again, and this time, they will succeed. If you think Republicans can repair our healthcare issues, then you are living in a delusional state. If they get hold of it, we could possibly become worse than a third-world country when it comes to healthcare. We are practically there now, but having them in charge, without any checks or balances, will surely put the nail in the coffin when it comes to our healthcare. Many right-wing politicians can't even agree that the right to an abortion is actually about healthcare for the mother. The only thing they see when it comes to abortion is that they consider it a crime against the fetus. In their minds, only the fetus has all the rights. The mother has none. But when the fetus is born, and is now a child, they won't do anything to help that child. It no longer has any importance once it is outside of the womb. The mother has absolutely no rights. She is nothing but a vessel for that baby. If having the baby puts her life in danger, well, in right-wingers' opinions, that's just too bad. A woman has to carry the baby to term, no matter what. If she is sick and could possibly die, again, oh well, it is what it is. If the mother dies, then the fetus dies, but that doesn't matter. None of this makes sense, but the people who create these oppressive laws make no sense and aren't trying to. To these crazy right-wing nuts, the mother has no value, only the fetus. It is a very twisted and hypocritical way to view the world. If they tell you they are pro-life, tell them they are full of shit. They don't care any more about life than a serial killer does. They are, in their way, serial killers. If you think that is a harsh way to view it, then tell that to the woman who is forced to go through hell with an unviable fetus causing her to hemorrhage and possibly to die. This is what is happening in several states where they are forcing women to carry their fetus to full term or brutally wait for the pregnancy to fail. You have to hope that if you are that woman in that kind of terrible distress, you don't die or destroy your chances of ever conceiving again. If she tries to get help from her doctor, then she and her doctor could possibly end up in prison. So you tell me, if you think that these oppressive and destructive laws, seemingly there to save the fetus, but can kill the mother, is not in some way like being in control of serial-killing right-wing nuts who think so little of her life. They also don't care about the child. Once the child is born, it is nothing but a burden to society. If it dies in poverty or from illness, that also is not important. It only has worth as a fetus. That is the stark truth of the decision to end Roe v. Wade and make abortion illegal. This might only be the case in half the states, but if the right-wing nuts have their way, this will soon be the law of the land for the entire country. They ultimately aren't saving anyone, not the fetus, the mother, or our wretched society. And that comes to the final, and I think most important issue, and that is saving our democracy. In this election, we will see how this country feels. Will the people of this country see the truth behind all of the gaslighting and the lies, and cast their vote with both intelligence and sanity? Or will they be caught up in the rhetoric, think that the price of gas or the cost of eggs and milk is too high, be apathetic, thinking that both sides are the same, and either vote for one of the detestable and unworthy candidates, all of which are on the Republican side, or just not vote at all? If they go this route, then we surely will all watch as our democracy dies. If you think I missed the Supreme Court in my examination of the issues from the Rasmussen poll, I have not. Part of us losing our democracy is due to the latest decisions of the Supreme Court. They are actively working to make sure the rights we deem precious will disappear. We must stop that. We need to find a way to stall the inevitable. And the only way to do that is to vote for people who will help with this cause. Right now, the only ones who fit that bill are the Democrats. We have to vote only for Democrats. I am not a fan of Democrats, but there are no other choices. If you vote Republican for any candidate, be it a senator, governor, congressperson, secretary of state, treasurer, councilperson, school board member, or judge, you are voting against the chance of keeping our democracy stable. There is barely any Republicans that have shown the willingness in the last couple of years to fight for our democracy, except for Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, but neither will be in Congress next year. The opposite is the truth for Republicans. They either want to actively kill our democracy by welcoming a more authoritarian construct, or they keep their mouth shut, allowing our democracy to fail. All Republicans want is to have power, and all the rest be damned. On November 9th, or a week or a month later, when all the votes are finally counted, what will we be? Will we still have some hope for our faltering democracy? We may find ourselves in some turmoil. Many Republicans say they will not accept the results if they lose, which may mean many court challenges and accusations of unfair elections. In fact, it is said that they have skewed the polls in order to say that they are leading in the polls, so that if any candidates do lose on election day, they can then claim fraud. It's a diabolical plot. And this, alone, can put our democracy into a tailspin. Even if we are intelligent and savvy enough to vote for the candidate that stands for democracy, the other side might make the victory an impossible one. These elections could cast a significant pall over everything. I am not sure that we will be in good shape no matter what happens. My confidence in the process is seriously shaken. But I want to be proven wrong. I have thought long and hard about this country's future. I see very dark days ahead. I want to have hope, but I am filled with grave uncertainty. I want to believe that those who wish to sustain our democracy will come out in large numbers and stave off any challenge. But I will keep my opinion reserved until I see the results of this and future elections. We all have a question to ask. What is the most important thing to you this election day? Is it voting for the person you think might bring down the cost of eggs and milk or saving our human rights, future, and democracy? What if they are the same candidate? The Republicans have no intention of making your life easier. They only want what they want. Trust me, your welfare is not part of what they want. They will not make the economy better for you. They only want to make things better for themselves. Democrats, as imperfect and lacking as they are right now, are our only hope. Until we can change the dynamics of this country to help make things better for the average citizen, they are the only choice. Do the right thing for yourself, for your family, and your country, and cast your vote for those who will work to preserve what is precious. Without our democracy, all the rest, including helping our economy, means nothing. If you haven't yet, go out and vote. I have voted and am doing my duty as a citizen, and I will be working as a poll worker at the polls on election day. If you can't be a poll worker, volunteer to ensure that everyone can vote and that no one can stop them. Drive people to the polls and do what you can to make sure everyone can vote. Help save our democracy. Keep fighting the good fight. And, also, join our critical thinking revolution movement if you want to show the world how you feel. You will find Critical Thinking Revolution merch at our website, beagreatthinker.com, or on our Etsy store, Great Thinker. That is all I have for you today. If you liked this episode, please share it with your family, friends, and neighbors. The more people hear about us, the more we can get the word out about our little podcast. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of the Be a Great Thinker podcast. Until we see you next time, please use your voice and your vote. You have the power to make the change we need for this country. And also please remember, question everything.
You've been listening to the Be a Great Thinker podcast. We take deep dives and look at stories from social, the psychological, the political, the ridiculous, to the mundane. It's what we do. Celebrating ideological diversity and independent thinking. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. But in the meantime, hit the website at beagreatthinker.com, on Facebook at Be a Great Thinker, and on Etsy at Great Thinker. See you next time.